In this video, we'll look at a handful of the artist and designer examples for the Week 12 assignment, as well as tying in some of the design vocabulary for this week. So our first example comes from the artist Annie Albers, and here we have an example of an alternating rhythm, where the artist is repeating motifs or elements, but changing their position. Now, if you look closely here, this composition is actually divided into four. So there's a dividing line horizontally right at the middle, and one vertically right at the middle. And each pair of sections, so the top left and the bottom right, uses the same repeated element. So same thing with the top right and the bottom left. And essentially they're just inversions of each other. One is this red sort of check mark on a blue background. The other is the blue check mark on the red background. And so we actually have two forms of alternation here, sort of a meta alternation of the larger quadrants, along with a sub-alternation of the individual elements themselves. Another example from the same artist shows us parallelism. So this is where lines or shapes stay on the same plane, the same distance from each other, and never meet. So you can see all of these horizontal lines here are parallel to one another. They're also arranged in a regular rhythm, where we're repeating identical elements using the same distance between them. So you can see almost all of these horizontal lines, as well as the vertical ones, are spaced equally from one another. This next example is a pretty funny one from the artist Aaron Koblin, who used Amazon's Mechanical Turk, which is sort of a very low-cost freelance website, and he paid about 10,000 people 2 cents a piece each to draw their version of a sheep. So this is a detail from that artwork, which is sort of a scrolling arrangement of 10,000 different versions of a drawing of a sheep. And this is a nice, simple example of just repetition, which is the same thing appearing more than once, arranged in different locations in a composition. Next we have Libs Elliott, whose quilts give us a really interesting example of progressive rhythm, where we see changes of a motif or an element each time it's repeated. And we can see that in this rear quilt here, where we have different sizes and different tones of these triangular and stripe shapes over the course of the composition. This is such an interesting example to me because this artist is actually using many of the same types of software tools that we're studying in this unit, but using them to generate patterns for quilts. Next we have an example from Jennifer Steinkamp, and this is a composition that takes advantage of random rhythm or a random pattern, where there is repetition, but it's not necessarily apparent what the order is. So we can see that here in the still version. This is actually an animation, so I'll play a little bit of this here and we can see how it unfolds. Now you might notice some of the elements are actually spinning in 3D space. That's because these are made with 3D models rather than two-dimensional, which is mostly what we're working in this unit. And last but not least, we have an example from Millie Tibbs, and this shows us a sequence, which is simply the following of one element after another in a particular order. So we have a sequence here of a geometric pattern in the front of the image plane, followed by a naturalistic landscape in the background. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of some of the artist examples for week 12. Take some time to check out some of the other examples on your own under this week's reading and research page on Canvas.